You're born underwater, but that's not where you'll stay. Your mother didn't build you a nest or wrap you in anything soft. She just released thousands of eggs into the murky water, and you were one of them. Most of your siblings won't make it past the first few hours. Fish are already circling, snapping up eggs like they're at an all-you-can-eat buffet. You're just a speck floating in the current, completely defenseless and totally unaware that the odds are stacked against you. But somehow, you survive those first critical moments. Your egg stays intact, while others around you get devoured or swept away by the tide. Inside your protective shell, you're developing fast. Your body is forming, your fins are taking shape, and something unusual is happening to your gills. They're not like other fish gills. They're designed for something special, though you don't know it yet. After a few days, you break free from your egg. You're tiny, translucent, and barely visible to the naked eye. You look like any other baby fish at this point, but you're not. You're a mudskipper, and your life is going to be completely different from anything swimming around you. For now, though, you drift with the current, feeding on microscopic plankton and trying not to get eaten. The water you're born into isn't crystal clear like a tropical reef. It's murky, filled with sediment, and it smells like rotting plants. This is a mangrove swamp, and it's going to be your home for the rest of your life. The water levels changes constantly. Sometimes, it's deep enough that you can swim freely. Other times, it drops so low that the mudflats are completely exposed to the air. Most fish would panic in a place like this, but you're built for it. As you grow over the next few weeks, your body starts changing in ways that would seem impossible to other fish. Your pectoral fins are getting stronger and more muscular. Your eyes are moving higher up on your head. Your gills are developing special chambers that can hold water even when you're out of it. You don't understand what's happening, but your body knows exactly what it's doing. Then comes the day everything changes. The tide goes out and the water level drops fast. Other fish are frantically swimming toward deeper water, but you don't follow them. Instead, something tells you to stay put. The water gets shallower and shallower until suddenly you're sitting on wet mud with no water covering your body at all. Any normal fish would be gasping and dying right now, but you're not gasping. You're breathing just fine. Your first time out of water is awkward. You don't know how to move on land yet, so you just sit there looking around with your bulging eyes. The world above water is completely different from what you're used to. It's brighter, louder, and full of movement. Birds are flying overhead, crabs are scuttling across the mud, and insects are buzzing around everywhere. This is your introduction to a world that most fish will never see. After a while, the tide starts coming back in, and you slip back into the water. But something has changed. You've tasted life on land, and you want more. Over the next few days, you start spending more and more time out of water. You learn to use your strong pectoral fins like little arms, pulling yourself across the mud. It's clumsy at first, but you're getting better at it. Your gills are working overtime to keep you alive during these land excursions. They're holding onto water like a built-in scuba tank, giving you precious minutes to explore before you need to return to the water. But even more importantly, your skin is absorbing oxygen directly from the air. You're essentially breathing through your skin, which is something most fish could never dream of doing. Food on land is abundant and different from what you're used to. Small insects get trapped in the mud, and they're easy pickings for a hungry young mudskipper. You learn to snap them up quickly before they can escape. Worms burrow through the sediment, and you become expert at digging them out. There are tiny crustaceans hiding in the mud, and you discover that they taste even better than the plankton you've been eating. But land also brings new dangers. Birds are constantly hunting for small fish like you, and they've learned that mudskippers are easy targets when they're out of water. You have to stay alert at all times, ready to dive back into the water or hide under a piece of driftwood at the first sign of trouble. The sun can dry out your skin if you stay out too long, which would be fatal. You're walking a tightrope between two worlds, and one mistake could end everything. As you grow bigger and stronger, your confidence on land increases. You start venturing further from the water's edge, exploring tide pools and muddy banks that other fish could never reach. Your eyes, now positioned on top of your head like a crocodile's, give you excellent vision both above and below water. You can spot predators coming from almost any direction. Your territory is expanding, but so is the competition. Other mudskippers are doing exactly what you're doing, and the good spots for hunting are limited. You start having your first territorial disputes with fish your own size. It's nothing too serious yet, just some aggressive posturing and chasing each other around. But you're learning that this world doesn't have room for everyone. The older mudskippers in your area are much bigger than you, and they've claimed the best territories for themselves. They've built elaborate burrows in the mud, complete with multiple entrances and air pockets for breathing. These burrows are like underwater mansions, and they're completely off limits to smaller fish like you. If you get too close, you'll be chased away immediately, so you stick to the edges, hunting in the less desirable areas and trying to avoid conflict. You're still learning the rules of mudskipper society, and making enemies this early in life would be a bad idea. You watch the older fish carefully, studying their techniques and waiting for your chance to claim better territory. Your body continues to change as you mature. Your fins are becoming more powerful, allowing you to move faster on land and in water. Your gill chambers are expanding, giving you more time to spend out of water without suffocating. Your skin is getting tougher and more efficient at absorbing oxygen from the air. You're becoming a true amphibian, equally at home in both worlds. The mangrove swamp is a harsh place to grow up. The water temperature fluctuates wildly depending on the tide and the weather. During low tide, shallow pools can become scalding hot under the tropical sun. During storms, the water becomes turbulent and filled with debris. The salinity changes constantly as fresh water from rivers mixes with seawater from the ocean. Most fish couldn't handle these extreme conditions, but you're thriving in them. Your diet is becoming more varied as you learn to exploit different food sources. You've discovered that certain types of algae growing on the mud are not only edible, but actually quite nutritious. Small mollusks hiding in the sediment provide protein and minerals your growing body needs. When the tide brings in organic matter from the ocean, you're there to scavenge whatever looks appetizing. But the most exciting discovery is learning to hunt actively rather than just scavenging. You've figured out that if you create vibrations in the mud by slapping your tail, small worms and crustaceans will surface to investigate. It's like ringing a dinner bell, and you've become quite good at this technique. Other young mudskippers have started copying your method, which is both flattering and annoying, since it means more competition for the same food sources. The seasonal changes in your environment are dramatic. During the wet season, heavy rains turn the normally brackish water almost completely fresh. Many of the marine organisms you're used to eating disappear, replaced by different species that prefer the lower salinity. You have to adapt your hunting strategies and find new food sources. It's challenging, but it's also making you a more versatile and capable predator. During the dry season, water levels drop to their lowest point of the year. Vast areas of mudflat are exposed for months at a time, creating a terrestrial landscape that stretches as far as you can see. This is when your amphibious abilities really shine. While other fish are crowded into the few remaining pools of water, you have access to huge areas of hunting ground that they can't reach. Your social interactions are becoming more complex as you encounter the same individuals repeatedly. You're starting to recognize other mudskippers by their size, coloration, and behavior patterns. Some are aggressive and territorial, others are more passive. A few seem to be loners who avoid contact with others entirely. You're learning to read these personality differences and adjust your own behavior accordingly. There's a hierarchy forming among the mudskippers in your area, and you're somewhere in the middle. The biggest, oldest fish command respect and get first choice of the best territories and food sources. The smallest, youngest fish stay out of everyone's way and take whatever scraps they can find. You're big enough now that you don't have to defer to everyone, but you're not strong enough to challenge the real power players yet. Your burrow digging skills are improving rapidly. What started as simple depressions in the mud are becoming more sophisticated structures. You've learned to create multiple chambers connected by tunnels with air pockets strategically placed for breathing during high tide. The entrance is carefully camouflaged to avoid attracting unwanted attention from predators or competitors. The engineering challenges of burrow construction are more complex than you initially realized. The mud has to be just the right consistency. Too wet and the walls collapse. Too dry and it's impossible to dig. You have to account for tidal changes that will flood your burrow twice a day. The location has to provide easy access to both land and water hunting grounds. It's like building a house, and you're getting better at it with each attempt. Your burrow isn't just a place to hide, it's becoming your base of operations. You store food there during times of abundance, saving it for when hunting is more difficult. You retreat there when predators are active or when environmental conditions become too harsh. It's your safe space in a world full of dangers, and defending it is becoming increasingly important to your survival. But burrow ownership comes with responsibilities and risks. Other mudskippers are constantly probing for weaknesses in your defenses, looking for opportunities to take over your territory. You have to patrol regularly, making your presence known and deterring potential invaders. It's exhausting work, but losing your burrow would mean starting over from scratch in a less desirable location. The predator pressure is intensifying as you grow larger and more visible. Herons have learned that mudskippers are easy prey when they're focused on feeding, and they've developed hunting strategies specifically for catching you. They wait motionlessly at the water's edge, striking with lightning speed when you get too close. You've had several close calls, and each one has taught you to be more cautious. Crabs are another constant threat, especially the larger species that hunt in the same mudflat areas where you feed. They're heavily armored, surprisingly fast, and their claws can inflict serious damage. You've learned to give them a wide berth and to never turn your back on one, even if it seems to be ignoring you. Some of your fellow mudskippers have learned this lesson the hard way. Human activity in the mangrove swamp is increasing, and it's changing your world in ways you don't fully understand. Boats pass through more frequently, creating wakes that disrupt your feeding and sometimes damage your burrow. Fishing nets occasionally drag through your territory, forcing you to find new hunting grounds. The water quality seems different too, though you can't pinpoint exactly how. Despite all these challenges, you're thriving. You're bigger, stronger, and more skilled than you were just a few months ago. Your territory is secure, your burrow is well constructed, and your hunting success rate is improving steadily. You're no longer the helpless larva that drifted with the current, completely at the mercy of your environment. You've become a capable predator and a master of both land and water. But your biggest challenges are still ahead of you. The competition for resources is about to intensify dramatically, and the territorial disputes you've experienced so far are nothing compared to what's coming. Soon, you'll face decisions that will determine not just your survival, but your chance to pass your genes on to the next generation. The seasons are changing again, and with them comes your first real test of dominance. You're approaching sexual maturity, and everything about your behavior is shifting. The casual territorial skirmishes you've had before were just practice rounds. Now the stakes are life or death, and every mudskipper in the area knows it. Your body is transforming in preparation for what's coming. Your dorsal fin is becoming more pronounced, developing bright colors that flash when you spread it wide. Your jaw is getting stronger, your muscles more defined. These aren't just cosmetic changes, they're weapons. The other males are going through the same transformation, and soon you'll all be competing for the right to mate. The first sign of the breeding season is the increased aggression among the larger males. Fights that used to end with one fish backing down now escalate into brutal physical confrontations. You watch from a safe distance as two fully grown males tear into each other, their fins locked, bodies writhing in the mud as they try to establish dominance. The loser retreats with torn fins and damaged pride. The winner claims a prime piece of real estate and immediately begins fortifying his position. You're not ready for that level of violence yet, but you're getting close. Your own territorial instincts are becoming stronger every day. When a smaller mudskipper ventures too close to your burrow, you don't just chase it away. You pursue it relentlessly, making sure it understands that this area belongs to you. Your tolerance for trespassers has completely disappeared. The competition isn't just about fighting, though. It's about building the most impressive territory possible. The males who succeed in attracting mates are the ones who can offer the best combination of prime real estate, well-constructed burrows, and abundant food sources. You throw yourself into upgrading your own territory, expanding your burrow system, and claiming additional hunting grounds. Your architectural skills have reached a new level of sophistication. Your burrow now extends deep into the mud, with multiple levels and specialized chambers. The main entrance is positioned for optimal water access, while secondary exits provide escape routes if predators discover your location. You've even created a special chamber near the surface that stays dry during high tide, a perfect nursery for future offspring. But construction work makes you vulnerable. While you're focused on digging and moving mud, other mudskippers are watching, waiting for opportunities to strike. You've learned to work in short bursts, constantly scanning for threats. More than once, you've had to abandon a project halfway through because rivals were moving in to challenge your claim. The stress of constant vigilance is exhausting, but it's also sharpening your instincts. You can now detect the slightest movement in your peripheral vision, identify the difference between a harmless crab and a potential threat from 50 yards away, and assess the fighting capability of other mudskippers with just a glance. These skills are keeping you alive in an increasingly dangerous world. Food competition has reached fever pitch. The best hunting spots are now heavily contested, with multiple mudskippers competing for the same resources. You've developed new hunting strategies to stay competitive, including night foraging when most others are less active. Your improved night vision gives you an advantage in the darkness, allowing you to catch prey that others miss. You've also learned to diversify your diet even further. When the usual food sources become too competitive, you've discovered that certain types of detritus washed up by the tides contain surprising nutritional value. Decomposing plant matter might not be appetizing, but it's abundant and largely ignored by other predators. It's not your preferred meal, but it keeps you fed when times are tough. The social dynamics of your Mudskipper community are becoming increasingly complex. Alliances form and dissolve based on territorial boundaries and resource availability. You've noticed that some of the more successful males have learned to cooperate when facing external threats, even though they're fierce competitors most of the time. It's a delicate balance between cooperation and competition that requires constant adjustment. Your own social position is improving steadily. You're no longer one of the smaller fish that gets pushed around by everyone else. Your territory is well established, your burrow is impressive, and your fighting skills have been tested in several minor conflicts. You haven't faced a serious challenge from any of the top-tier males yet, but you're confident you could hold your own if it came to that. The females in your area are starting to take notice of your success. They're not ready to mate yet, but they're beginning to evaluate potential partners for when the time comes. You catch them watching you as you patrol your territory, assessing your physical condition and the quality of your burrow system. Their attention is both encouraging and nerve-wracking. One female in particular seems interested in your territory. She's been spotted near your burrow entrance several times, though she always retreats when you approach. She's not the largest female in the area, but she's healthy and appears to be nearing reproductive maturity. If you could attract her as a mate, it would be a significant achievement for a mudskipper of your age and status. But attracting a mate requires more than just a good territory. You need to master the complex courtship displays that mudskippers use to communicate their fitness and intentions. The most impressive males can leap completely out of the water, performing aerial acrobatics that demonstrate their strength and agility. Your own jumping ability is improving, but you're not quite at the level of the established breeders yet. You practice your displays during quiet periods when other mudskipper aren't around to judge your performance. Leaping, fin spreading, color flashing, each element has to be perfectly timed and coordinated. It's like learning a complicated dance, and getting it wrong could mean the difference between successful reproduction and genetic failure. The territorial boundaries that once seemed stable are shifting constantly now. As more males reach breeding age, the competition for prime real estate intensifies. Your neighbors are expanding their claims, testing your defenses, probing for weaknesses. You respond by reinforcing your own boundaries and making it clear that any encroachment will be met with force. A serious territorial dispute erupts when a male from a neighboring area decides to challenge your claim to a particularly productive hunting ground. He's slightly larger than you and has more experience, but your territory gives you the advantage of fighting on familiar ground. The confrontation begins with threat displays, fin spreading, jaw gaping, aggressive posturing. When neither of you backs down, it escalates to physical contact. The fight is brutal but brief. You clash head to head, jaws locked, each trying to force the other into submission. His experience shows, as he uses techniques you haven't encountered before, but your familiarity with the terrain gives you crucial advantages. You maneuver him into a position where the mud slope works against him, and when he loses his footing, you press your advantage mercilessly. He retreats, but not before inflicting some damage of his own. Your dorsal fin is torn, and there are bite marks along your flank. The wounds aren't serious, but they'll take time to heal, and they'll leave you vulnerable to infection if you're not careful. Still, you've won an important victory. Your reputation as a serious competitor is now established throughout the local mudskipper community. Recovery from the fight takes longer than you expected. The stress of constant territorial defense is taking a toll on your body, and you find yourself spending more time resting in your burrow. This gives rivals opportunities to test your defenses, forcing you to emerge and reassert your dominance, even when you'd rather be healing. There's no rest for the successful in mudskipper society. Your hunting efficiency improves as you recover your strength. You've learned to conserve energy by being more selective about which prey to pursue and which to ignore. Small, low-energy targets aren't worth the effort anymore unless food is particularly scarce. You focus on larger, more nutritious prey that provides better returns on your energy investment. The wet season brings new challenges as rising water levels flood large portions of your territory. Your burrow system proves its worth during these periods, providing safe havens that remain accessible even when surface conditions become difficult. Many of the less experienced mudskippers struggle during flood periods, giving you opportunities to expand your influence when the waters recede. You've also learned to take advantage of the seasonal changes in prey behavior. Many species become more active during certain tidal conditions or weather patterns, and you've memorized these patterns to maximize your hunting success. It's like having a calendar of opportunities, and you're becoming expert at timing your activities for maximum benefit. The approach of your first breeding season fills you with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. You're physically ready. Your body has developed all the characteristics of a mature male mudskipper. Your territory is well established and defensible. Your burrow system is impressive by any standard. But the competition will be fierce, and failure means waiting another year for the next opportunity. Everything you've learned, every skill you've developed, every battle you've fought has been preparation for this moment. The weak don't get to reproduce in mudskipper society. Only the strongest, smartest, and most successful males earn the right to pass their genes to the next generation. You've worked hard to become one of those males, but the ultimate test is still ahead. The breeding season arrives like a switch being flipped. Suddenly, every male mudskipper in the area is operating at maximum intensity. The casual territorial disputes you've grown used to disappear overnight, replaced by serious battles for prime breeding real estate. You watch as established males who've coexisted peacefully for months turn into bitter enemies, fighting over territories they've held for years. Your body responds to the seasonal change with a surge of hormones that makes you feel invincible. Your colors become more vibrant, your fins more pronounced, your movements more aggressive. You're not the same fish who hatched from that tiny egg months ago. You're a warrior, a competitor, a potential father. The transformation is both thrilling and terrifying. The first major challenge comes from an unexpected direction. A juvenile male, barely half your size, starts testing your boundaries. Under normal circumstances, you'd chase him away without breaking stride. But breeding season changes everything. Even small threats have to be dealt with decisively, because showing any weakness invites larger challenges. You pursue the intruder relentlessly, driving him completely out of your territory and making sure every other mudskipper sees what happens to trespassers. Your burrow becomes the center of your universe. You spend hours each day improving it, adding new chambers, reinforcing walls, creating the perfect environment for potential offspring. The work is exhausting, but it's also satisfying in a way you've never experienced before. This isn't just about survival anymore. It's about creating something that will outlast you, but construction makes you vulnerable, and rivals are watching for opportunities. One morning, you emerge from deep excavation work to find another male inspecting your territory. He's not actively challenging you, just evaluating what you've built. The inspection feels like a violation, and you respond with immediate aggression. He retreats, but not before getting a good look at your defenses. You realize you're being scouted, studied, sized up for a future confrontation. The psychological pressure is intense. Every shadow could be a competitor. Every movement could signal an attack. You find yourself jumping at sounds that wouldn't have bothered you before, spinning around to check for threats that aren't there. The paranoia is exhausting, but it's also keeping you alive. In breeding season, the difference between caution and carelessness is the difference between success and genetic failure. Food becomes secondary to territory defense, which creates new problems. You're burning enormous amounts of energy on patrols and confrontations, but you can't risk leaving your territory unguarded long enough for serious hunting. You learn to snatch quick meals during brief lulls in the action, wolfing down whatever you can find before returning to guard duty. Your body weight drops, but your reflexes get sharper. The first serious challenge arrives on a day when the tide is particularly low, exposing vast areas of mudflat. A large male from the eastern boundary of your territory decides this is his moment to expand. He's been watching you for weeks, studying your patterns, waiting for the right opportunity. He moves methodically, claiming small sections of your hunting ground and daring you to stop him. You meet him at the disputed boundary, both of you fully aware that this confrontation will determine who controls the prime real estate between your territories. He's bigger than your previous opponent, more experienced, with scars that tell stories of battles won and territories claimed. But you have advantages too, intimate knowledge of every mud ridge and depression in this area, plus the desperate energy of a fish fighting for his future. The battle begins with an elaborate threat display. Both of you rise up on your pectoral fins, dorsal fins fully extended, mouths agape to show your teeth. You circle each other warily, each looking for an opening while demonstrating your physical capabilities. The display goes on for several minutes, giving both of you time to assess your opponent's condition and commitment level. When the actual fighting starts, it's more violent than anything you've experienced before. This isn't about chasing away a minor threat. This is about fundamental control of territory that could determine your reproductive success. You crash together with shocking force, jaws snapping, fins tearing, bodies writhing in the mud as each of you tries to gain a decisive advantage. Your opponent is strong, but you're faster. When he commits to a powerful bite that would end the fight if it connected, you twist away at the last second and counterattack while he's off balance. Your teeth find purchase along his flank, drawing blood and eliciting a grunt of pain. He responds by slamming his body weight into you, trying to pin you down in the soft mud. The fight becomes a brutal wrestling match, both of you using every technique you've learned through seasons of smaller conflicts. You use the terrain to your advantage, maneuvering him toward a section of particularly soft mud that limits his mobility. He tries to drag you toward deeper water, where his size advantage would be more pronounced. Neither strategy succeeds completely, but both inflict damage after what feels like hours, but is probably only minutes. Your opponent makes a critical mistake. He lunges forward with all his strength, committing everything to one decisive attack. You see it coming just in time to dodge, and his momentum carries him past you into an awkward position. You don't hesitate. You strike at his exposed flank with everything you have, your jaws clamping down and holding firm. He thrashes wildly, trying to shake you loose, but you maintain your grip. The taste of his blood fills your mouth, and you feel him weakening as the fight drains out of him. Finally, he stops struggling and gives the submissive signal, fins folded, body lowered, head turned away. You release him immediately and watch as he retreats toward his original territory, moving slowly and favoring his injured side. Victory feels incredible, but it also brings new responsibilities. Your territory has expanded significantly, giving you access to prime hunting grounds and breeding sites. But it's also more difficult to defend, with longer boundaries and multiple potential attack routes. You spend the next few days frantically patrolling, marking your new boundaries with scent markers and aggressive displays. The win attracts attention from unexpected quarters. Other males who previously ignored you now watch your movements carefully, recalculating their assessment of your fighting ability. Some seem intimidated by your success, giving you more space than before. Others appear to be sizing you up for future challenges, recognizing that defeating you would now bring significant territorial rewards. More importantly, the females notice your expanded territory. The same female who showed interest before now approaches more boldly, swimming along the edges of your domain and occasionally venturing onto the mudflats within your boundaries. She's not ready to commit yet, but she's clearly evaluating you as a potential mate. The attention is both exciting and nerve-wracking. Your courtship displays improve dramatically under the pressure of having a real audience. The jumping exercises you practiced in private now have purpose and urgency. You leap higher than ever before, spinning in midair and landing with precision that demonstrates your physical control. Your fin displays become more elaborate, cycling through colors and patterns you didn't even know you possessed. But courtship requires more than just physical displays. You have to prove you can provide for offspring, which means demonstrating your hunting prowess while she watches. This is tricky because good hunting requires patience and stealth, while courtship displays require flashy, attention-getting behavior. You learn to combine both, making kills with theatrical flair that shows off your skills while actually securing food. The female's interest intensifies as your displays improve. She begins spending entire tidal cycles within your territory, following you at a respectful distance as you patrol and hunt. Occasionally, she approaches close enough that you can see the intricate patterns on her fins and the intelligence in her eyes. These moments feel electric with possibility, but you force yourself to be patient. Rushing the courtship process could ruin everything. Other males notice the female's presence in your territory and respond with increased aggression toward you. Some attempt direct challenges, hoping to drive you away and claim both your territory and your potential mate. Others try more subtle approaches, attempting to lure her away with their own displays performed just outside your boundaries. You have to balance defending against these threats while continuing to court her effectively. A particularly aggressive rival begins making daily incursions into your territory, always retreating when you respond, but never backing off completely. He's testing your resolve, trying to wear you down through constant, low-level harassment. The strategy is effective. You're exhausted from responding to his probes while trying to maintain your courtship routine. Something has to give. You decide to end the harassment permanently. Instead of just chasing him to your boundary as usual, you pursue him deep into his own territory, making it clear that his tactics have escalated the conflict beyond normal territorial disputes. The chase turns into a running battle across multiple territories, disrupting the entire local mudskipper community and drawing attention from all the neighboring fish. The fight that follows is shorter, but more intense than your previous victory. Your opponent is fresh while you're tired from days of harassment, but your anger gives you focus and determination he can't match. You fight with a ferocity that surprises even yourself, driven by the knowledge that failure means losing everything you've worked to build. When he finally submits, he retreats not just from your territory, but from the entire area, relocating to avoid future conflicts. Your decisive victory has unexpected consequences. Word spreads through the mudskipper community that you're not just another territorial male, but a serious force to be reckoned with. Challenges decrease as other males recalculate the cost-benefit analysis of confronting you. Your reputation as a fighter is now established, giving you a psychological advantage in future conflicts. The female's response to your latest victory is immediate and obvious. She approaches closer than ever before, sometimes coming within a few body lengths as you go about your daily activities. Her own displays become more elaborate, showing off her health and fertility in ways that make your heart race. The courtship phase is clearly entering its final stage, but success brings new pressures. Your expanded territory and growing reputation make you a target for older, more experienced males who previously ignored you as beneath their notice. These fish have been breeding successfully for years, and they view your rapid rise as a threat to their established dominance. You sense that your biggest challenges are still ahead. Your burrow system becomes a masterpiece of mudskipper architecture as you prepare for the possibility of offspring. Multiple chambers, perfect drainage, strategic air pockets, defensible entrances. You've created an underground fortress that could protect a family through multiple tidal cycles. The construction work is backbreaking, but it's also a labor of love for offspring you haven't even fathered yet. The female begins inspecting your burrow, swimming through the flooded sections and carefully examining the construction quality. Her approval is obvious in the way she lingers in certain chambers, testing the firmness of walls and the positioning of air pockets. When she finally emerges, she positions herself near the main entrance in a way that signals clear interest. The courtship phase is nearly complete. Your final displays are your most spectacular yet. You leap higher, spin faster, flash brighter colors than you ever have before. Every movement is calculated to demonstrate your fitness, your territory quality, your potential as a father. When she responds with her own displays, mirroring your movements and colors, you know the moment has arrived. The actual mating is anticlimactic after all the buildup, a brief physical contact that lasts only seconds but represents the culmination of everything you've worked toward since hatching. Afterward, she retreats to the deepest chamber of your burrow system to lay her eggs, while you take up position as guardian of the entrance. Your role has shifted from suitor to protector, and the stakes have never been higher. The eggs represent your genetic legacy, your contribution to the next generation of mudskippers, but they're also incredibly vulnerable, requiring constant protection from predators, environmental hazards, and rival males who would destroy them to eliminate future competition. You settle in for what you know will be the most challenging period of your life, defending your offspring until they're ready to face the world on their own. Guarding eggs turns out to be the most stressful job you've ever had. You can't hunt properly because leaving the burrow undefended for more than a few minutes invites disaster. You can't sleep deeply because predators are most active during the hours when you're naturally drowsy. You can't even relax during high tide because that's when some of the most dangerous threats are mobile. The first week is the worst. Every shadow makes you jump. Every sound puts you on high alert. A hermit crab scuttling past your burrow entrance sends you into full defensive mode, fins spread wide and ready for combat. A piece of floating debris bumping against your territory has you convinced that a rival male is testing your defenses. The paranoia is exhausting, but it's also necessary. One moment of inattention could cost you everything. Your female stays deep in the burrow, tending to the eggs with a dedication that borders on obsession. She rarely ventures to the surface, and when she does, it's only for the briefest feeding trips before disappearing back into the depths. You catch glimpses of her during these excursions. Her colors have dulled, her movements are slower, and she's lost weight from the constant care required by developing embryos. Food becomes a major problem. Your usual hunting grounds are too far from the burrow to patrol effectively, and the closer areas have been picked clean by your constant presence. You're forced to survive on whatever small prey wanders within striking distance of your entrance. It's not enough to maintain your strength, and you feel yourself getting weaker as the days pass. A younger male starts probing your defenses, testing how far he can venture into your territory before you respond. Under normal circumstances, you'd chase him off aggressively and make sure he understood the boundaries. But you can't risk a prolonged chase that takes you away from the eggs. Your responses become more measured, more conservative, and he notices immediately. He gets bolder, venturing closer each day and staying longer before retreating. Other fish notice your apparent weakness and begin their own tentative incursions. What started as a single minor threat multiplies into a coordinated campaign of harassment designed to wear down your defenses. You realize they're not necessarily trying to steal your territory. They're trying to force you into making mistakes that will leave the eggs vulnerable. The psychological warfare is brutal. Every challenge requires a response, but overreacting wastes energy while underreacting invites escalation. You have to calibrate your aggression perfectly, showing enough strength to deter attacks while conserving enough energy for the long haul. It's like playing chess while running a marathon, and the margin for error is non-existent. Your reputation from earlier victories helps, but only to a point. The older, more experienced males know that egg guarding makes even the strongest fish vulnerable. They watch your struggles with professional interest, calculating when you might be weak enough to challenge safely. You see them gathering at the edges of your territory, not quite ready to attack, but clearly preparing for the opportunity. Sleep deprivation becomes a serious problem. You catch brief naps when the tide provides natural barriers to intrusion, but deep sleep is impossible. You develop a technique of resting with one eye open, literally keeping half your brain awake while the other half recovers. It's not restful, but it's better than nothing, and it keeps you functional during the worst of the harassment campaigns. The eggs begin showing signs of development, which should be encouraging, but actually increases your stress levels. The embryos are reaching the stage where disturbance could be fatal, making your protective duties even more critical. You can see movement inside some of the eggs when the light hits them just right, tiny forms that represent the future you fought so hard to secure. A serious challenge finally comes from an unexpected source. One of your former neighbors, a fish you'd coexisted with peacefully for months, decides that your weakened state makes you vulnerable to conquest. He's been watching your decline, noting how your responses have become slower and less aggressive. When he makes his move, it's not a probe or a test. It's a full-scale invasion. The timing is perfect from his perspective and terrible from yours. You're at your weakest point, having gone days without a proper meal and weeks without adequate sleep. He's fresh, well-fed, and confident that victory is within reach. The fight begins at dawn when your energy levels are lowest, and it quickly becomes clear that this isn't going to be another quick victory. Your experience gives you advantages that raw strength can't match. You know every inch of the battlefield, every depression and rise that can be used tactically. When he tries to use his superior size to overpower you, you maneuver him into positions where the terrain works against him. When he attempts to drag the fight toward deeper water, you use your knowledge of underwater currents to maintain position. But experience can only compensate for so much. You're fighting on empty reserves while he's operating at full capacity. Your movements become sluggish as the battle continues, your reflexes slowing just enough to give him openings you wouldn't normally allow. He presses his advantage relentlessly, sensing that victory is within reach if he can just maintain pressure. The turning point comes when you realize that conventional fighting tactics won't work. You're too weak for a prolonged battle, so you need to end this quickly or not at all. You feign a stumble, making yourself appear even more vulnerable than you actually are. When he lunges forward to capitalize on what he thinks is your collapse, you're ready with a counterattack that uses his own momentum against him. Your jaws lock around his throat before he realizes he's been tricked. The fight ends instantly, not because you've inflicted serious damage, but because he recognizes that his position is hopeless. He submits immediately, retreating with his dignity intact, but his territorial ambitions thoroughly crushed. You watch him disappear, breathing hard and knowing that you can't survive many more confrontations like this one. The victory has costs that go beyond physical exhaustion. Other potential challengers witnessed the fight and drew different conclusions from the outcome. Some see your tactical brilliance and decide you're still too dangerous to challenge. Others notice how close you came to losing and begin planning their own attacks. You've bought yourself time, but you haven't solved the underlying problem of your deteriorating condition. Your female emerges from the burrow more frequently now, perhaps sensing that the eggs are approaching hatching time. She looks even more worn than before, her body showing the strain of weeks spent in constant attendance. But there's something different in her eyes, an anticipation that tells you the wait is almost over. You feel a mixture of relief and terror at the thought. The first hatchlings appear on a calm morning when the water is unusually clear. Tiny, translucent versions of yourself begin emerging from the egg mass, their movements weak but purposeful. They don't look like much, barely visible specks that could easily be mistaken for debris, but they represent everything you've fought for since reaching maturity. Your protective instincts shift into overdrive as the babies become mobile. They're incredibly vulnerable, unable to swim strongly or escape from even the smallest predators. Every creature in the vicinity suddenly becomes a potential threat. Crabs, small fish, even insects that normally wouldn't concern you. You find yourself attacking shadows and phantom movements, your paranoia reaching new heights. The female takes charge of herding the young toward safe areas, using subtle movements and chemical signals to guide them away from danger. You focus on perimeter defense, creating a moving protective bubble around the family group as it ventures out for the first feeding expeditions. It's exhausting work that requires perfect coordination between you and your mate. Feeding the young presents new challenges. They're too small to handle the prey you normally catch, requiring tiny organisms that are difficult to locate and capture. You find yourself hunting for microscopic creatures you haven't bothered with since your own larval stage. The work is tedious and unrewarding, but watching your offspring grow makes every effort worthwhile. Not all the babies survive their first few days. Some are too weak to compete for food. Others fall victim to predators despite your best efforts. Each loss hits you harder than expected. These aren't just random young fish. They're your genetic legacy, your contribution to the future. You find yourself taking increasingly desperate risks to protect the survivors. The surviving young begin showing distinct personalities within their first week. Some are bold, venturing further from safety than seems wise for such small creatures. Others are cautious, staying close to cover and responding quickly to danger signals. A few seem particularly intelligent, learning to recognize different types of threats and adjusting their behavior accordingly. Your role as protector becomes more complex as the young develop. They need increasing amounts of food, but also greater freedom to explore and learn. You have to balance keeping them safe with allowing them the experiences they'll need to survive independently. It's a delicate calculation that changes daily as they grow stronger and more capable. Other mudskipper families in the area create additional complications. Your young sometimes mix with theirs during feeding aggregations, making it difficult to keep track of who belongs to whom. Territorial disputes take on new dimensions when offspring are involved. Fights that might have been simple boundary conflicts become battles for resources that could determine juvenile survival rates. You notice changes in your own behavior that surprise you. Risks that once seemed acceptable now feel reckless when you consider what your death would mean for the young. Territorial disputes that you might have escalated become exercises in restraint as you prioritize family survival over personal dominance. It's a fundamental shift in perspective that makes you question many of your previous decisions. The young reach a critical developmental stage where they begin attempting their first ventures onto land. Watching them struggle with the same challenges you mastered months ago brings back memories of your own awkward early attempts. But you also feel intense anxiety as they wobble across the mudflats, knowing that a single mistake could be fatal for such inexperienced travelers. Teaching them the basics of amphibious life becomes your primary occupation. You demonstrate proper gill breathing techniques, show them how to identify safe mud compositions, and model the movement patterns that work best on different terrain types. Some learn quickly, others require repeated demonstrations, and a few seem to struggle with concepts that should be instinctive. Your territory requirements change as the young become more mobile. What was once adequate space for 2 adults now feels cramped when trying to accommodate an entire family group. You begin expanding your boundaries again, but carefully this time. You can't afford the energy expenditure of major territorial wars while also caring for offspring. The expansion brings you into conflict with neighbors who have their own families to consider. Negotiations that might once have been settled through simple displays of strength become complex diplomatic affairs involving multiple families and overlapping territorial claims. You find yourself learning skills you never knew you needed: patience, compromise, strategic thinking that goes beyond immediate tactical advantage. Food sharing becomes a constant challenge as the young develop bigger appetites. What once fed 2 adults comfortably now has to stretch across multiple hungry mouths. You and your mate take turns going without food to ensure the offspring get adequate nutrition. The sacrifice feels natural, but it also leaves both of you increasingly vulnerable to challenges from better-fed rivals. Your mate begins showing signs of preparing for another reproductive cycle, even as your current offspring still require intensive care. The timing seems impossible. You're already stretched beyond your limits, caring for one batch of young, but her body is following biological imperatives that don't account for practical considerations like resource availability or parental exhaustion. The prospect of another clutch of eggs fills you with conflicting emotions. Part of you is excited by the possibility of expanding your genetic contribution to the next generation. Another part is terrified by the logistical challenges of protecting and providing for even more offspring. You're not sure you have the physical or emotional resources for another round of the breeding cycle. Your current young begin showing signs of independence, venturing further from the family territory and staying away for longer periods. It's a natural progression that you should celebrate, but it also means accepting that your direct influence over their survival is diminishing. They're becoming individuals rather than dependents, which is both thrilling and terrifying. Some of your offspring show particular promise, displaying the intelligence and adaptability that mark successful mudskippers. Others seem destined for more ordinary lives, content to follow established patterns rather than pushing boundaries. A few concern you with their apparent lack of survival instincts. They may not last long once they're fully independent. The first of your young to establish its own territory chooses an area adjacent to yours, close enough for occasional contact, but far enough to avoid direct competition. Watching this offspring claim and defend its first piece of real estate fills you with pride and nostalgia. You see yourself in its aggressive displays and territorial marking behaviors. Your relationship with your mate evolves as the demands of child-rearing begin to ease. The intense cooperation required for protecting eggs and young has created bonds that go beyond simple reproductive partnership. You've become a team, coordinated in ways that make you more effective than either of you could be alone. It's a relationship built on shared struggle and mutual dependence. The seasonal cycles continue their relentless progression, bringing new challenges and opportunities with each tidal change. Your body shows the wear of constant vigilance and sacrifice, scars from territorial battles, weight loss from sharing food with offspring, the deep fatigue that comes from months of interrupted sleep. But you've also gained something invaluable, the knowledge that your genes will continue into the next generation. Your territory has become a complex ecosystem centered around your burrow system. Multiple generations of construction and improvement have created an underground network that rivals anything in the local mudskipper community. Younger fish often study your architecture, trying to understand the engineering principles that make it so effective. The respect you've earned through successful reproduction changes your status in the community. Other mudskippers treat you differently now, not just as a territorial competitor, but as a proven breeder whose genetic line has demonstrated its viability. It's a subtle shift that affects every interaction, from casual encounters to serious negotiations over resources. But success also makes you a target. Younger males see defeating you as a way to claim not just your territory, but your reputation. They study your methods, looking for weaknesses they can exploit. Some attempt direct challenges, others try more subtle forms of harassment, designed to wear down your defenses over time. Your experience gives you advantages in these confrontations that raw strength can't match. You've learned to read the intentions of potential challengers, to identify which threats are serious and which are mere posturing. You've developed a reputation for decisive action that often ends conflicts before they begin. Potential rivals know that challenging you means accepting significant risks. The young you've raised begin reaching their own reproductive maturity, creating new dynamics in the local mudskipper community. Some establish territories near your own, forming a loose alliance of related individuals. Others disperse to distant areas, carrying your genetic material to new populations. A few don't survive to reproduce, falling victim to the same hazards that claim so many mudskippers. Your mate produces another clutch of eggs, forcing you back into the exhausting cycle of protection and provision. But this time, you have advantages you lacked before: experience with the process, established relationships with neighbors, and offspring from your first breeding who can provide occasional assistance. The second round is still challenging, but it's not the desperate struggle your first breeding season became. The pattern establishes itself as your life settles into a rhythm of breeding, protecting, and territorial maintenance. Each cycle brings new challenges as environmental conditions change and new competitors appear, but it also brings the deep satisfaction of contributing to the continuation of your species. You've become more than just another mudskipper trying to survive. You've become an ancestor. Your burrow system continues to expand and improve with each breeding cycle. What started as a simple refuge has evolved into a complex installation that serves multiple functions: nursery, fortress, food storage facility, and social center. Other mudskippers in the area use your construction techniques as models for their own building projects. The scars from your various battles tell the story of your rise to prominence in the local community. Each mark represents a challenge overcome, a threat defeated, a piece of territory claimed and held. Your body has become a living record of your success, and other mudskippers read that record when deciding whether to challenge or cooperate with you. Your hunting skills have evolved to accommodate the demands of feeding multiple generations. You've learned to think strategically about food acquisition, planning hunting expeditions that maximize returns while minimizing time away from protective duties. The techniques you've developed are more efficient than anything you used as a solitary fish, born from necessity and refined through practice. The relationships you've built with neighboring mudskippers have created a loose network of mutual support that benefits everyone involved. Territorial boundaries that once required constant enforcement are now maintained through diplomatic agreements that reduce conflict and conserve energy for all parties. It's a more sophisticated approach to community organization than the simple aggression that characterizes younger fish. Your reputation extends beyond the immediate area, as successful breeding and territorial defense create stories that spread through the wider mudskipper population. Younger fish from distant territories sometimes appear at your boundaries, not to challenge, but to observe and learn. You've become a standard against which other mudskippers measure their own success. The teaching role you've developed with your own offspring expands to include unrelated young who seek guidance. You find yourself mentoring fish who remind you of your own early struggles, sharing techniques and knowledge that took you years to develop. It's a role you never expected to fill, but one that provides its own satisfactions. Your physical condition reflects the toll of successful reproduction and territorial dominance. You're not as fast as you once were, not as quick to anger, not as willing to take unnecessary risks, but you're also more skilled, more experienced, and more strategic in your approach to challenges. Age has brought wisdom that compensates for declining physical capabilities. The mudflat environment continues its own evolution, shaped by seasonal changes, human activity, and the complex interactions of its inhabitants. You've witnessed multiple generations of these changes, learning to adapt your strategies as conditions shift. Your long-term perspective gives you advantages over younger fish who only know current conditions. Your legacy is becoming visible in the local mudskipper population as your offspring and their descendants establish their own territories and breeding success. The genetic traits that allowed your survival and reproduction are spreading through the community, creating a lineage that may persist long after your own death. It's a form of immortality that few creatures achieve. The territorial disputes that once consumed so much of your energy have become less frequent as your status becomes established. Younger fish still test your boundaries occasionally, but they do so with the knowledge that challenging you seriously means accepting significant risks. Your reputation has become a defensive weapon more effective than physical strength. Your relationship with the environment has deepened through years of intimate familiarity with every aspect of your territory. You know the seasonal patterns of every food source, the behavioral quirks of every neighbor, the structural characteristics of every hiding place. This knowledge base has become one of your most valuable assets, impossible for challengers to replicate quickly. The breeding cycles continue, each one adding to your genetic contribution to the next generation while also taking a toll on your physical condition. You're caught between the biological imperative to reproduce and the practical limitations of an aging body. Each decision about whether to breed again becomes more complex as the costs and benefits shift with your changing circumstances. Your latest batch of offspring faces challenges you never encountered at their age. The environment is changing in subtle ways that make traditional survival strategies less reliable. Water temperatures fluctuate more wildly than they used to, forcing young mudskippers to adapt faster than previous generations. You watch them struggle with conditions that test the limits of their inherited abilities. Competition among the juveniles has intensified as population density increases in your area. More successful breeding by established pairs means more young fish competing for the same resources. Your offspring have to fight harder for territory and food than you did, despite having the advantage of experienced parents. It's a harsh lesson in how success can create its own problems. You notice changes in your own behavior as you age. Risks that once seemed manageable now feel foolishly dangerous. You're more cautious in territorial disputes, more selective about which challenges to accept, more willing to negotiate rather than fight. It's not cowardice. It's strategic thinking informed by hard-won experience and the knowledge that your death would leave dependents vulnerable. Your mate shows similar changes, becoming more protective of offspring and more conservative in her territorial choices. The partnership you've built over multiple breeding cycles has evolved into something deeper than simple reproductive cooperation. You've become a team that functions with an efficiency younger pairs can't match, compensating for individual limitations through coordinated effort. The burrow system you've spent years perfecting becomes the model that other mudskippers attempt to copy. You catch neighbors studying your construction techniques, measuring the angles of your tunnels and the placement of your air chambers. Some try to replicate your methods exactly, while others modify your designs to suit their own circumstances. It's flattering, but it also means your architectural advantages are gradually spreading to potential competitors. Food competition reaches new levels of intensity as your hunting grounds become overcrowded with both established adults and ambitious juveniles. The techniques that once gave you decisive advantages are now common knowledge, forcing you to develop new strategies or accept reduced efficiency. You adapt by focusing on prey types that others ignore, finding nutrition in sources that younger fish consider beneath their notice. Your hunting expeditions become more carefully planned as your energy reserves decline. You can't afford the casual inefficiency of your younger days, when missing a target or pursuing the wrong prey was just a minor setback. Every calorie spent hunting has to produce results, which means becoming more selective about when and where you pursue food. It's a shift from opportunistic hunting to calculated resource acquisition. The social dynamics of your territory become increasingly complex as multiple generations of your offspring establish their own breeding territories nearby. Family relationships create both opportunities and obligations that didn't exist when you were a solitary fish. You find yourself mediating disputes between relatives, sharing resources during difficult periods, and coordinating group responses to external threats. Your reputation as a successful breeder attracts attention from researchers who study mudskipper behavior. They observe your territorial boundaries, document your breeding success, and analyze your construction techniques. You're unaware of their scientific interest, but their presence adds another variable to an already complex environment. Their observation methods are subtle, but they occasionally interfere with normal territorial interactions. The younger males in your area show different fighting styles than the generation you grew up with. They're more aggressive, less patient, more willing to escalate conflicts quickly rather than going through traditional threat displays. You adjust your own tactics accordingly, but you also worry about what this trend means for the stability of the local mudskipper community. Your territorial boundaries have remained stable for so long that they've become accepted facts of life for neighboring mudskippers. Disputes now focus on minor adjustments rather than major realignments, and most conflicts are resolved through negotiation rather than violence. It's a more civilized approach to territory management, but it also means that significant changes require more complex diplomatic processes. The eggs from your latest breeding show higher survival rates than your early clutches, reflecting your improved protective techniques and better territorial positioning. But they also face new challenges that didn't exist when you first started breeding. Environmental changes, increased competition, and novel predators all contribute to selection pressures that may favor different traits than those that ensured your own success. Your physical condition continues its gradual decline despite your best efforts to maintain peak performance. Your movements are slightly slower, your reflexes marginally delayed, your endurance noticeably reduced. These changes are subtle enough that casual observers might not notice, but experienced fighters can detect the differences and adjust their strategies accordingly. The teaching role you've developed with younger mudskippers expands as your reputation for successful breeding spreads. Fish from distant territories seek you out for guidance on everything from burrow construction to territorial negotiation. You find yourself becoming an unofficial elder statesman of the local community, consulted on disputes, and asked for advice on complex problems. Your mate begins showing signs of reproductive exhaustion after multiple breeding cycles. Her egg production is declining, and her recovery time between clutches is increasing. The biological clock that drives mudskipper reproduction is beginning to wind down, forcing difficult decisions about whether to attempt additional breeding or focus on supporting existing offspring. The seasonal patterns you've relied on for years become less predictable as environmental conditions shift. Traditional feeding times don't align with prey availability the way they used to. Weather patterns that once signaled optimal breeding conditions now bring unexpected challenges. You're forced to adapt strategies that worked for decades to accommodate a changing world. Your offspring, who established territories nearby, begin facing their own reproductive pressures, creating new dynamics in the family group. Some seek your advice on mate selection and territorial expansion. Others challenge your authority as they assert their own independence. The balance between supporting family members and maintaining your own competitive position becomes increasingly delicate. The construction projects that once consumed so much of your energies shift from expansion to maintenance as your burrow system reaches optimal size. Repairing damage from storms and high tides becomes more important than adding new chambers. Your focus changes from growth to preservation, reflecting the broader shift in priorities that comes with age and established success. Your hunting grounds begin showing signs of overexploitation as increased population pressure depletes traditional food sources. Prey species that were once abundant become scarce, forcing you to expand your dietary range and modify your hunting techniques. The easy abundance of your early territorial years gives way to more challenging resource management requirements. The younger generation of mudskippers shows behavioral traits that concern you. They're more aggressive in territorial disputes, less respectful of established boundaries, and quicker to escalate conflicts to violence. Their impatience with traditional diplomatic processes creates instability that affects the entire community. You find yourself working harder to maintain peaceful coexistence. Your relationship with your mate deepens as shared challenges create bonds that go beyond reproductive partnership. You've become genuine companions, coordinating your activities with an efficiency that makes you more effective together than either could be alone. The partnership has evolved into something that transcends simple biological cooperation. The territorial network you've helped establish through years of careful negotiation begins showing strain as new arrivals challenge existing agreements. Younger fish who didn't participate in creating the current system see no reason to respect arrangements they had no part in making. Maintaining diplomatic stability requires constant effort and occasional demonstrations of strength. Your legacy becomes visible in the behavioral patterns of your offspring as they reach breeding age. Some display the same patient territorial strategies that brought you success. Others develop their own approaches that reflect changing environmental conditions. Watching them adapt your techniques to their own circumstances provides both pride and anxiety about their chances of success. The mudflat environment shows increasing signs of human influence as development pressure affects water quality and habitat availability. Changes that occur gradually over your lifetime represent dramatic shifts compared to historical conditions. Your adaptability is tested as traditional survival strategies become less effective in a rapidly changing environment. Your energy allocation becomes more strategic as physical limitations force difficult choices between competing priorities. Territorial defense, offspring protection, and personal survival all require resources you no longer possess in abundance. Every decision involves trade-offs that could determine whether your genetic line continues or ends with your current offspring. The breeding territory you've defended for years begins attracting interest from younger pairs who see your success and want to replicate it. Some attempt to establish adjacent territories, hoping to benefit from your experience and protection. Others plot to claim your territory directly, waiting for signs of weakness they can exploit. Managing these pressures requires diplomatic skills you never expected to need. Your latest offspring show adaptations to environmental conditions that didn't exist when you were young. Their gill structures are slightly different, their behavioral patterns more flexible, their territorial instincts modified to accommodate higher population densities. Evolution is occurring on timescales short enough for you to observe, driven by the selection pressures your own success helped create. The social hierarchy that emerged from years of territorial competition begins shifting as older mudskippers age out and younger ones assert themselves. Your position near the top of this hierarchy is secure for now, but you can see the forces that will eventually displace you. The cycle of rise and decline that governs all mudskipper communities is beginning another turn. Your hunting efficiency reaches new heights as experience compensates for declining physical capabilities. You know exactly where to find prey under any given conditions, how to approach different species most effectively, and when to abandon unsuccessful pursuits. This knowledge base represents decades of accumulated learning that gives you significant advantages over less experienced competitors. The burrow maintenance that once seemed like simple upkeep becomes more challenging as your digging capabilities decline. Repairs that you could complete quickly in your prime now require multiple sessions spread over several days. You're forced to prioritize which maintenance tasks are essential and which can be deferred, making difficult choices about your living space. Your mate's condition reflects the toll of multiple breeding cycles and years of territorial stress. She's slower to recover from egg laying, more susceptible to environmental stresses, and less aggressive in defending territory. The partnership that once felt invincible now shows signs of vulnerability that concern both of you, though neither admits it directly. The offspring who dispersed to distant territories occasionally return with news of conditions in other mudskipper communities. Their reports suggest that the challenges you face are widespread, affecting mudskipper populations across the region. Environmental changes, increased competition, and habitat degradation are creating pressures that test the adaptability of the entire species. Your territorial boundaries begin requiring more active defense as younger mudskippers probe for weaknesses with increasing boldness. The reputation that once deterred casual challenges is losing its effectiveness as new arrivals who didn't witness your prime years test your current capabilities. You're forced to demonstrate strength more frequently, draining energy reserves you can't easily replace. The diplomatic relationships you've cultivated with neighboring mudskippers become more important as direct confrontation becomes less viable. Your ability to negotiate favorable agreements and maintain peaceful coexistence becomes a survival skill as valuable as fighting ability once was. The shift from warrior to diplomat reflects the broader changes that come with age and accumulated wisdom. Your latest breeding attempt produces fewer eggs than previous cycles, and the survival rate among those that hatch is lower than you've experienced before. The decline could reflect your aging condition, environmental pressures, or simple statistical variation. Regardless of the cause, it forces you to confront the reality that your reproductive prime is ending. The teaching relationships you've developed with younger mudskippers become more complex as your students begin achieving their own success. Some remain grateful for your guidance and seek to maintain positive relationships. Others view your continued presence as an obstacle to their own advancement. Managing these evolving dynamics requires political skills you never thought you'd need. Your physical condition shows the accumulated wear of years spent fighting, digging, and surviving in a harsh environment. Scars from old battles ache during weather changes. Joints that once moved smoothly now show signs of stiffness. Your body is becoming a limitation rather than an asset, forcing you to rely more heavily on intelligence and experience to maintain your position. The environment around your territory continues evolving as human activity increases and climate patterns shift. Water temperatures that once followed predictable cycles now fluctuate unpredictably. Prey species compositions change as some populations decline while others expand. Traditional seasonal cues become unreliable guides for timing important activities like breeding and territory maintenance. Your relationship with your offspring becomes more complex as they establish their own breeding territories and face their own challenges. Some seek your advice and support, while others assert their independence by challenging your authority. The family dynamics that once seemed straightforward become intricate webs of cooperation, competition, and mutual dependence. The legacy you've built through years of successful breeding and territorial dominance begins facing threats you never anticipated. Environmental changes could make your carefully constructed burrow system obsolete. Population pressures could overwhelm the diplomatic agreements that maintain territorial stability. Your genetic contribution to the next generation faces selection pressures that didn't exist when you were young. Your hunting strategies continue evolving as prey populations shift and competition intensifies. Techniques that worked reliably for years become less effective as target species adapt or decline. You're forced to learn new approaches and modify established patterns, demonstrating that adaptation never ends regardless of age or experience. But the territorial network you helped establish through years of careful negotiation shows signs of strain as environmental pressures increase. Agreements that worked when resources were abundant become sources of conflict when scarcity forces difficult choices. Maintaining stability requires constant diplomatic effort and occasional shows of force to deter opportunistic challenges. Your mate's declining condition forces difficult decisions about future breeding attempts. Her reduced egg production and slower recovery times suggest that additional reproductive cycles might be dangerous for both her and potential offspring. The biological imperatives that once drove your behavior now conflict with practical considerations about survival and resource allocation. The seasonal cycles that once provided reliable frameworks for planning territorial activities become less predictable as environmental conditions shift. Traditional patterns of prey availability, weather conditions, and competitor behavior no longer align with historical norms. Your long-term perspective becomes both an advantage and a liability, as past experience becomes less relevant to current conditions. Your offspring, who achieved breeding success, begin facing their own age-related challenges, creating a new generation gap in the family hierarchy. Some adapt well to changing conditions, while others struggle with pressures you never faced at their age. Watching their successes and failures provides insights into how your own genetic line will fare in an uncertain future. The reputation that once protected you from casual challenges becomes a liability as younger mudskippers see defeating you as a way to establish their own credentials. The same success that elevated your status now makes you a target for ambitious competitors who view your aging condition as an opportunity. Your legacy becomes both protection and provocation. The burrow system that once seemed like an impregnable fortress begins showing vulnerabilities that younger mudskippers are quick to exploit. Structural weak points that developed over years of use become entry routes for invaders who study your defenses with the patience of engineers. You find yourself spending more time on repairs and less on the territorial expansion that once drove your ambitions. Your hunting expeditions require more careful planning as your reduced stamina forces efficiency over opportunity. The casual foraging that sustained you in your prime gives way to calculated strikes that must succeed on the first attempt. Missing a target now means going hungry rather than simply trying again, and the margin for error shrinks with each passing season. The diplomatic relationships that replaced violent confrontation as your primary tool for territorial management become more fragile as your physical deterrent value declines. Neighbors who once respected your boundaries through fear now test them through calculated aggression. Your negotiation skills become your primary weapon, but words only work when backed by the credible threat of force. Your mate's latest clutch produces offspring that seem less robust than previous generations, struggling with environmental challenges that their older siblings handled easily. Whether this reflects declining parental condition, environmental degradation, or simple genetic variation, the result is the same. Fewer of your offspring survive to establish their own territories. Your genetic legacy faces pressures you never anticipated. The younger generation of mudskippers displays behavioral patterns that concern you deeply. They're more aggressive in territorial disputes, less willing to respect established boundaries, and quicker to escalate minor disagreements into serious conflicts. The diplomatic stability you helped create through years of careful negotiation crumbles as impatient newcomers reject traditional approaches to resource management. Your own offspring begin asserting independence in ways that challenge your authority and complicate family dynamics. Some establish territories that directly compete with your interests, forcing you to choose between supporting family members and protecting your own survival. Others seek alliances with unrelated mudskippers, creating political complications that require careful management to avoid open conflict. The environmental changes that have been building for years accelerate beyond your ability to adapt to traditional strategies. Water chemistry fluctuations that once occurred seasonally now happen unpredictably, forcing constant adjustments to hunting patterns and territorial defense. Temperature variations that your generation learned to anticipate become chaotic, making long-term planning nearly impossible. Your physical condition deteriorates in ways that affect every aspect of your daily existence. Movement that once felt effortless now requires conscious effort and planning. Reflexes that saved your life countless times become unreliable under stress. Your body, once your greatest asset in territorial competition, becomes a limitation that shapes every decision you make. The teaching role you developed with younger mudskippers becomes more complex as environmental conditions change faster than traditional knowledge can accommodate. Techniques that ensured your success may not work for the next generation, forcing you to help them develop new approaches while questioning the relevance of your own experience. The wisdom of age conflicts with the reality of rapid change. Your hunting grounds show signs of ecosystem collapse as overpopulation and environmental stress deplete traditional food sources. Prey species that supported generations of mudskippers disappear or relocate, leaving barren areas where abundance once flourished. You're forced to compete with desperate neighbors for increasingly scarce resources, destabilizing relationships that took years to establish. The territorial boundaries that once seemed permanent begin shifting as environmental pressures force population redistribution. Mudskippers abandon marginal territories as conditions become uninhabitable, creating refugee populations that strain resources in more viable areas. Your own territory faces invasion pressure from displaced individuals who have nowhere else to go. Your mate's condition reaches a critical point where continued breeding attempts could be fatal for both her and potential offspring. The biological drive to reproduce conflicts with practical survival concerns, forcing decisions that will determine whether your genetic line continues or ends with your current offspring. The choice between reproduction and survival becomes stark and immediate. The burrow maintenance that once seemed manageable becomes overwhelming as your digging capabilities decline and structural problems multiply. Chambers that took days to excavate now require weeks of intermittent effort. Repairs that you could complete quickly in your prime become major projects that exhaust your limited energy reserves. Your home becomes a burden rather than an asset. Your offspring, who established distant territories, send disturbing reports about conditions in other mudskipper communities. Environmental degradation, habitat loss, and population crashes are affecting mudskipper populations across the region. The challenges you face aren't isolated local problems, but symptoms of broader ecosystem failure that threatens the entire species. The reputation that once provided protection now attracts unwanted attention from researchers and competitors alike. Younger mudskippers study your methods not to learn from them, but to exploit weaknesses in outdated techniques. Your success becomes a liability as others seek to claim your achievements for themselves or use your example to justify their own territorial ambitions. Your hunting efficiency reaches its absolute peak as experience compensates for declining physical abilities, but even perfect technique can't overcome the fundamental limitation of reduced prey availability. You know exactly how to catch everything in your territory, but there's simply less to catch than there used to be. Expertise becomes irrelevant when the ecosystem itself is failing. The social hierarchy that emerged from years of territorial competition begins its inevitable restructuring as older mudskippers age out and younger ones assert dominance. Your position near the top remains secure for now, but you can see the forces gathering that will eventually displace you. The cycle of rise and decline continues its relentless progression. Your relationship with your mate evolves beyond reproductive partnership into something resembling genuine companionship. You coordinate your declining capabilities to maintain effectiveness that neither could achieve alone. The bond forged through shared struggles becomes more important than the biological imperatives that originally brought you together. The diplomatic network you helped establish faces pressure from younger mudskippers who reject traditional approaches to territorial management. Agreements that maintained stability for years crumble as impatient newcomers pursue aggressive expansion strategies. Your peacekeeping efforts become more critical and more difficult as the community fragments along generational lines. Your latest offspring show adaptations that seem designed for conditions that don't yet exist, suggesting that evolutionary pressures are anticipating future environmental changes. Their behavioral patterns differ significantly from your own, emphasizing flexibility over territorial dominance and cooperation over individual competition. You're witnessing the birth of a new survival strategy. The construction projects that once brought pride and security become sources of constant anxiety as maintenance requirements exceed your capabilities. Structural failures that you could once repair quickly now require assistance from offspring or allies, creating dependencies that compromise your independence. Your burrow system becomes a shared responsibility rather than personal achievement. Your energy allocation becomes a constant balancing act between competing survival priorities. Territorial defense, offspring support, and personal maintenance all require resources you no longer possess in abundance. Every decision involves trade-offs that could determine whether you survive another season or become another casualty of environmental change. The environmental monitoring that once seemed like casual observation becomes critical survival intelligence as conditions change rapidly and unpredictably. Traditional seasonal patterns no longer provide reliable guidance for timing important activities. You're forced to develop new methods for predicting environmental conditions based on subtle cues that previous generations never needed to notice. Your hunting strategies undergo fundamental revision as familiar prey species disappear and new ones appear with different behavioral patterns. Techniques refined over decades become obsolete overnight when target species relocate or adapt to avoid traditional predation methods. Your expertise becomes a handicap when applied to unfamiliar situations. The family dynamics that once seemed straightforward become complex political relationships involving multiple generations and competing interests, supporting offspring conflicts with personal survival needs. Maintaining territorial integrity competes with family loyalty. The simple goal of genetic continuation fractures into multiple objectives that often contradict each other. Your physical decline accelerates as accumulated stress from years of territorial competition takes its toll. Old injuries that healed cleanly in your youth become sources of chronic pain that limit your mobility. Digestive efficiency decreases, making it harder to extract nutrition from available food sources. Your body begins failing in ways that threaten your ability to maintain basic survival functions. The seasonal migration patterns that once brought predictable waves of prey and competitors become erratic as environmental changes disrupt traditional ecological cycles. Resources that appeared reliably at specific times now arrive unpredictably or not at all. Your territorial planning, based on decades of observation, becomes useless when historical patterns no longer apply. Your offspring who achieved breeding success begin experiencing their own reproductive challenges as environmental conditions continue deteriorating. Lower egg survival rates, reduced offspring viability, and increased predation pressure affect the entire next generation. Your genetic legacy faces selection pressures that could eliminate your lineage despite your own breeding success. The teaching relationships you developed with younger mudskippers become strained as traditional knowledge conflicts with current environmental realities. Students who once sought your guidance now question whether your experience remains relevant to their challenges. The wisdom of age competes with the adaptability of youth in ways that benefit neither generation. Your mate's declining condition forces difficult decisions about resource allocation and care responsibilities. Supporting her reduces your own survival chances, but abandoning her contradicts the partnership bonds that sustained you both through previous challenges. The choice between loyalty and survival becomes a daily struggle with no clear resolution. The territorial network that once provided stability and predictability fractures under pressure from environmental change and generational conflict. Boundaries that seemed permanent dissolve as younger mudskippers reject diplomatic solutions in favor of aggressive expansion. Your peacekeeping efforts become more desperate and less effective as community cohesion collapses. Your hunting grounds undergo transformation that eliminates many traditional food sources while introducing new ones that require unfamiliar techniques to exploit. Adapting to these changes demands energy and learning capacity that you no longer possess in abundance. The environment is evolving faster than your ability to adjust your survival strategies. The reputation that once provided protection now makes you a target for younger mudskippers seeking to establish their own credentials through conflict with established elders. Your past successes become liabilities as ambitious competitors view defeating you as a shortcut to territorial dominance. Fame becomes a burden rather than an asset. Your burrow system, once a source of pride and security, becomes increasingly difficult to maintain as structural problems multiply faster than your ability to address them. Critical repairs compete with daily survival activities for your limited energy reserves. The fortress that protected multiple generations of offspring threatens to become a trap that limits your mobility and options. The environmental changes that have been building gradually throughout your lifetime reach a tipping point where traditional mudskipper survival strategies become inadequate. Water chemistry, temperature patterns, prey availability, and habitat structure all shift beyond the range of historical variation. Your species faces challenges that no previous generation ever encountered. Your offspring begin developing behavioral adaptations that seem designed for a world you barely recognize. Their territorial strategies emphasize mobility over permanence, cooperation over dominance, and flexibility over specialization. You're witnessing the evolution of your species in real time as environmental pressures select for traits that differ dramatically from those that ensured your own success. The social relationships that once provided security and companionship become sources of stress and obligation as community structures break down under environmental pressure. Maintaining diplomatic ties requires energy you need for survival, but abandoning them leaves you isolated and vulnerable. Every relationship becomes a calculated risk with uncertain benefits. Your physical condition reaches a point where major territorial disputes become potentially fatal, regardless of their outcome. The energy expenditure required for serious fighting could exhaust reserves you need for basic survival functions. Your strategic thinking shifts from winning conflicts to avoiding them entirely, even when avoidance means accepting territorial losses. The hunting efficiency that once compensated for declining physical capabilities reaches its absolute limit as prey scarcity makes even perfect technique insufficient for meeting nutritional needs. You know exactly how to catch everything in your territory, but catching everything available still isn't enough to maintain your condition. Expertise becomes irrelevant when resources themselves are inadequate. Your mate's condition deteriorates to the point where she can no longer contribute meaningfully to territorial defense or resource acquisition. Supporting her becomes an act of loyalty rather than practical partnership, draining resources that could be used for your own survival. The bonds forged through shared success are tested by shared decline. The environmental monitoring that once provided early warning of changing conditions becomes a source of constant anxiety as every observation confirms that conditions are worsening faster than anticipated. Traditional survival strategies prove inadequate for unprecedented challenges. Your experience becomes a liability when it suggests responses that no longer work. Your latest offspring struggle with environmental conditions that their genetic programming wasn't designed to handle. Higher mortality rates, reduced growth rates, and behavioral problems affect the entire clutch, despite your best protective efforts. The next generation faces challenges that may exceed their adaptive capacity. The territorial boundaries that once provided structure and predictability become fluid as environmental pressures force constant population redistribution. Neighbors abandon failing territories, creating vacant areas that attract new competitors. Your own boundaries face pressure from multiple directions as displaced mudskippers seek new homes. Your hunting strategies undergo continuous revision as prey species compositions shift and traditional food sources disappear. 6. Each successful technique you develop becomes obsolete when target species adapt or relocate. The arms race between predator and prey accelerates beyond your ability to keep pace with changing conditions. The family relationships that once provided support and cooperation become complicated by competing survival needs and limited resources. Supporting offspring conflicts with personal survival requirements. Territorial inheritance disputes create conflicts between generations. The simple goal of genetic continuation fractures into multiple competing objectives. Your physical decline becomes impossible to hide, as movement difficulties and reduced stamina affect your ability to maintain territorial boundaries. Younger mudskippers probe your defenses with increasing boldness, testing whether your reputation still carries the threat of effective retaliation. Your deterrent value decreases as your actual fighting capability diminishes. The seasonal patterns that once provided reliable frameworks for planning territorial activities become chaotic as environmental changes disrupt traditional ecological cycles. Migration timing, breeding seasons, and resource availability all shift unpredictably. Your long-term planning capabilities become useless when short-term survival requires constant adaptation. Your offspring, who established distant territories, report that environmental degradation is a regional phenomenon affecting mudskipper populations across vast areas. The challenges you face aren't isolated local problems, but symptoms of ecosystem-wide failure. Your species confronts an extinction crisis that no individual survival strategy can address. The diplomatic relationships that replaced violent competition as your primary tool for territorial management collapse, as younger mudskippers reject negotiated solutions in favor of aggressive expansion. Community stability gives way to chaos as traditional social structures prove inadequate for managing resource scarcity and environmental stress. Your burrow system, representing decades of construction and improvement, begins showing structural failures that exceed your ability to repair. Critical chambers flood during high tides, air pockets collapse under pressure, and tunnel walls erode faster than you can reinforce them. Your life's greatest achievement becomes a liability that threatens your survival. The teaching role you developed with younger mudskippers becomes irrelevant as environmental changes make traditional knowledge obsolete. Students who once sought your guidance now develop their own approaches to challenges that your generation never faced. The wisdom of experience conflicts with the necessity of innovation. Your hunting grounds undergo final transformation as the last reliable food sources disappear or become inaccessible. Prey species that sustained your territory for years vanish overnight as environmental conditions cross critical thresholds. Your expertise in catching specific types of prey becomes worthless when those prey no longer exist. The environmental changes that have been building throughout your lifetime reach a crescendo that overwhelms all traditional mudskipper survival strategies. Water chemistry, temperature patterns, habitat structure, and prey availability all shift beyond the adaptive capacity of your species. You're witnessing the end of the world as mudskippers have known it for countless generations. Your relationship with your mate enters its final phase as her condition deteriorates beyond any hope of recovery. The partnership that sustained you both through years of challenges becomes a one-way relationship where you provide care without receiving support. Loyalty competes with survival in ways that offer no satisfactory resolution. The territorial network you helped establish through years of careful diplomacy dissolves completely as environmental pressures make cooperation impossible and competition desperate. Neighbors who once respected boundaries now fight for survival with an intensity that destroys all social bonds. Community gives way to chaos as civilization collapses under environmental stress. Your offspring face challenges that no previous generation ever encountered, struggling with conditions that their genetic programming wasn't designed to handle. Environmental changes occur faster than evolutionary adaptation can accommodate. The next generation may represent the end of your lineage rather than its continuation. The reputation that once provided protection and respect becomes meaningless as social structures collapse and individual survival becomes the only priority. Past achievements offer no protection against current threats. Your legacy dissolves as the community that recognized and valued it ceases to exist. Your physical condition reaches the point where basic survival functions become difficult to maintain. Movement requires enormous effort, hunting becomes nearly impossible, and territorial defense exceeds your capabilities entirely. Your body begins the final phase of decline that will end your story. The mudflat environment that has been your home throughout your entire life undergoes transformation so complete that it becomes unrecognizable. A traditional mudskipper habitat disappears as environmental changes create conditions incompatible with your species' survival requirements. The world itself is ending, at least for creatures like you. Your final days unfold in a territory you can no longer defend, surrounded by family you can no longer protect, in an environment that no longer supports your species' survival. The individual success that once seemed so important becomes irrelevant in the face of ecosystem collapse. Your story approaches its end not through personal failure, but through the failure of the world itself. The seasonal cycles that once governed your existence become chaotic patterns that offer no guidance for survival planning. Environmental conditions change faster than adaptation can accommodate. Your species faces challenges that exceed its evolutionary capacity to address. The age of mudskippers draws toward its close. Your offspring begin their own desperate struggle for survival in a world that no longer resembles the one you conquered. Their challenges exceed anything your generation ever faced. The future you fought so hard to secure may not exist at all. Your genetic legacy enters an uncertain world where traditional survival strategies offer no guarantee of success. The burrow system that represented your life's greatest achievement becomes a monument to a vanishing way of life. Future generations, if they exist at all, may develop entirely different approaches to survival that make your architectural innovations obsolete. Progress becomes measured not by building upon past achievements, but by abandoning them entirely. Your story, like that of countless mudskippers before you, approaches its inevitable conclusion. But unlike previous generations who died knowing their offspring would continue their lineage in familiar environments, you face the possibility that your death may coincide with the end of your species' ability to survive in a rapidly changing world. The environmental chaos around you reaches a breaking point where even basic survival becomes a daily miracle. Your territory, once a carefully managed ecosystem, transforms into a wasteland where nothing familiar remains. The mudflats crack under temperature extremes your species never evolved to handle. Water that once supported abundant life becomes toxic soup that kills everything it touches. Your mate's final breath comes on a morning when the tide brings water so acidic it burns your gills. She doesn't struggle, doesn't fight the inevitable. Her body simply stops working after months of gradual shutdown. You stay beside her until the next tide takes her away, watching as the current carries off the partner who shared your greatest triumphs and survived your worst defeats. Alone now, you face challenges that would have been unthinkable just seasons ago. Your burrow floods with contaminated water that forces you to abandon chambers you spent years perfecting. The main entrance collapses during a storm, trapping you underground until you can dig an emergency exit with strength you barely possess. Your life's work crumbles around you as the environment itself becomes hostile to your existence. Food becomes a distant memory as the last prey species disappear from your territory. You find yourself eating things that would have disgusted you in your prime: rotting vegetation, dead insects, anything organic that might provide a few calories. Your body begins consuming its own muscle tissue to survive, leaving you weak and skeletal. Hunting becomes impossible when there's nothing left to hunt. Your offspring, who remained nearby, begin dying off one by one, victims of environmental conditions they can't adapt to fast enough. You watch helplessly as fish you raised from eggs struggle with poisoned water and contaminated food sources. Their deaths hit harder than your own approaching mortality because they represent the future you fought so hard to secure. The younger mudskippers, who once challenged your territory, are gone now, either dead or relocated to distant areas where conditions might still support life. Your territorial boundaries become meaningless when you're the only one left to respect them. The social structures that governed mudskipper society dissolve completely as survival becomes an individual rather than community challenge. Your movements become labored and painful as malnutrition and environmental toxins take their toll. Each step requires conscious effort and planning. Swimming becomes nearly impossible as your fins lose their strength and coordination. You spend most of your time motionless, in the deepest part of your burrow, conserving energy for the most basic life functions. The seasonal patterns that once provided reliable guidance for survival planning become completely chaotic. Weather systems that your species evolved to predict and exploit now arrive without warning and leave devastation in their wake. Traditional environmental cues become meaningless when the environment itself is dying. Your territory shows signs of complete ecological collapse as the last plants wither and die from soil contamination. The mud itself becomes toxic, filled with chemicals that burn your skin and poison your blood. The landscape transforms from living ecosystem to barren wasteland in a matter of weeks. Your home becomes uninhabitable even for a species adapted to harsh conditions. The water quality deteriorates beyond anything your gills can process safely. Each breath brings toxins that accumulate in your system faster than your body can eliminate them. The basic act of respiration becomes a slow poisoning that weakens you more each day. Your specialized breathing apparatus, once your greatest evolutionary advantage, becomes a liability in a contaminated world. Your hunting instincts persist even when there's nothing left to hunt, driving you to search empty mudflats for prey that no longer exists. You patrol dead territories out of habit, following behavioral patterns that served you well when the world still supported life. The programming that ensured your success becomes pointless repetition in a world where success itself is impossible. The chemical composition of your environment shifts so dramatically that your sensory systems can no longer interpret the information they receive. Scents that once guided you to food or warned of danger become indecipherable signals from a dying world. Your ability to navigate and hunt depends on environmental cues that no longer exist or mean what they used to. Your body temperature regulation fails as extreme weather conditions exceed your physiological tolerance limits. Heat waves that would have been merely uncomfortable in your youth now threaten to cook you alive. Cold snaps that you once weathered easily now drain energy reserves you can't afford to lose. Your adaptive capabilities reach their absolute limits and begin failing. The burrow system that protected multiple generations of your family becomes a tomb as structural failures multiply faster than your declining ability to address them. Tunnels collapse, chambers flood, and air pockets fill with toxic gases. The fortress that once seemed impregnable becomes a death trap that you lack the strength to escape or repair. Your offspring, who dispersed to distant territories, send no more reports because communication itself becomes impossible across the devastated landscape. You don't know if they're alive or dead, successful or struggling. The family network that once provided information and support dissolves into silence as environmental chaos isolates everyone in their own desperate survival battles. The mudflat ecosystem that supported countless generations of mudskippers undergoes final collapse as the last keystone species disappear. Food chains that took millennia to establish unravel in months. The biological foundation that your entire way of life depended on simply ceases to exist. Your species loses its ecological niche as the niche itself vanishes. Your memory begins failing as malnutrition affects your brain function. Techniques that took years to master become confused recollections. Territorial boundaries that you could once navigate blindfolded become unfamiliar landscapes that confuse and disorient you. Your expertise dissolves along with your physical capabilities. The social bonds that once connected you to a community of mudskippers become painful reminders of relationships that no longer exist. You find yourself calling out to neighbors who died months ago, following behavioral patterns that assume a social structure that has completely collapsed. Loneliness becomes a constant companion as isolation stretches beyond your psychological tolerance limits. Your digestive system begins shutting down as prolonged starvation and toxin exposure damage organs beyond their ability to repair themselves. Food that you manage to find becomes harder to process and extract nutrition from. Your body enters the final stages of systemic failure as multiple organ systems begin coordinated breakdown. The environmental monitoring that once helped you predict and prepare for changing conditions becomes a source of constant despair as every observation confirms that conditions continue worsening. Hope for improvement gives way to acceptance that the world you knew is gone forever. Your survival instincts conflict with the reality that survival itself may no longer be possible. Your breathing becomes labored and irregular as damaged gills struggle to extract oxygen from increasingly toxic water. Each breath requires conscious effort and delivers diminishing returns. The fundamental biological process that kept you alive throughout your entire existence begins failing in ways that herald the approaching end. The territorial instincts that drove your behavior throughout your adult life persist even as their purpose disappears. You continue to patrol boundaries that protect nothing, defend resources that no longer exist, and maintain territories that have no value. Behavioral programming that ensured your success becomes meaningless ritual in a world where success is impossible. Your vision begins failing as environmental toxins damage your eyes and malnutrition affects your nervous system. The bulging eyes that once gave you superior surveillance capabilities become clouded and unreliable. The world grows dim around you as your primary sensory advantage disappears. The construction skills that created your elaborate burrow system become irrelevant as you lose the strength to dig and the materials to build with. Your architectural expertise becomes useless knowledge in a world where building anything permanent is impossible. The craftsmanship that once defined your success becomes a painful reminder of capabilities you've lost. Your hunting reflexes slow and become unreliable as your nervous system deteriorates from prolonged stress and malnutrition. The lightning-fast responses that once made you a deadly predator become sluggish movements that couldn't catch the slowest prey. Your predatory capabilities dissolve along with your physical condition. The environmental cues that once guided your daily activities become indecipherable signals from a chaotic system. Tidal patterns that you could once predict with perfect accuracy become random events that catch you unprepared. Weather signs that your species relied on for countless generations become meaningless fluctuations in a dying atmosphere. Your body weight drops to levels that threaten basic organ function as your metabolism begins consuming vital tissues to maintain minimal life processes. Muscle mass that took years to build disappears in weeks of starvation. Your physical form becomes a skeletal shadow of the powerful predator you once were. The mudflat terrain that you knew intimately becomes alien landscape as environmental changes alter its fundamental characteristics. Navigation routes that you could follow instinctively become confusing mazes that exhaust your limited energy reserves. Your home territory becomes foreign ground that you struggle to recognize or traverse. Your reproductive organs begin shutting down as your body prioritizes immediate survival over future breeding potential. The biological drives that once motivated your most important decisions become irrelevant as continuation of your genetic line becomes impossible. Your evolutionary purpose dissolves as evolution itself fails to keep pace with environmental change. The water chemistry in your territory becomes so toxic that even brief exposure causes immediate damage to your gills and skin. The medium that once supported your amphibious lifestyle becomes hostile to your existence. Your specialized adaptations become liabilities in an environment they weren't designed to handle. Your temperature regulation system fails completely as extreme weather conditions overwhelm your physiological tolerance limits. Heat that you once managed through behavioral adaptations now threatens immediate death. Cold that you once weathered through metabolic adjustment now drains energy reserves you don't possess. The social hierarchy that once provided structure and purpose to Mudskipper society becomes a meaningless concept when there's no society left to organize. Your position in a ranking system that no longer exists offers no advantages when there are no competitors left to outrank. Status becomes irrelevant when survival itself is in question. Your appetite disappears as your digestive system begins final shutdown after months of processing inadequate and contaminated food sources. The hunger that once drove your hunting behavior gives way to nausea and discomfort when you attempt to eat. Your body rejects sustenance as it prepares for systematic shutdown. The communication abilities that once allowed you to negotiate territorial disputes and coordinate breeding activities become useless skills when there's no one left to communicate with. Your capacity for social interaction atrophies from disuse as isolation stretches beyond the limits of your psychological resilience. Your balance and coordination deteriorate as neurological damage from toxin exposure affects your motor control systems. Movement that once felt natural and effortless becomes clumsy stumbling that threatens to injure you further. Your grace and agility dissolve into painful awkwardness. The environmental knowledge that took decades to accumulate becomes obsolete information about a world that no longer exists. Weather patterns, prey behaviors, seasonal cycles, and ecological relationships that you mastered through years of observation become historical data with no current relevance. Your expertise dies with the environment it described. Your pain tolerance reaches its absolute limit as accumulated injuries, malnutrition, and toxin exposure create constant suffering that overwhelms your ability to cope. Discomfort that you once ignored becomes agony that dominates your consciousness. Your resilience crumbles under relentless assault from multiple sources of trauma. The mating displays that once attracted partners and established your reproductive fitness become painful reminders of capabilities you've lost and purposes you can no longer fulfill. Your elaborate courtship behaviors become meaningless gestures in a world where breeding has become impossible and partners no longer exist. Your immune system collapses under the combined stress of malnutrition, toxin exposure, and psychological trauma. Minor infections that your body once fought off easily become serious threats to your survival. Your natural defenses fail just when you need them most. The territorial boundaries that once defined your identity and purpose become arbitrary lines on a landscape that supports no life. Your domain shrinks from a thriving ecosystem to a small patch of contaminated mud where you wait for the inevitable. Your empire becomes a grave. Your cognitive function deteriorates as brain damage from prolonged malnutrition and toxin exposure affects your ability to think clearly and make decisions. Problem-solving skills that once ensured your survival become confused attempts to apply outdated solutions to unprecedented problems. Your intelligence fades along with your physical capabilities. The mudflat environment completes its transformation from living ecosystem to sterile wasteland as the last microorganisms die from contamination. The biological foundation that supported all higher life forms disappears completely. Your habitat becomes a monument to ecological collapse. Your breathing becomes increasingly shallow and irregular as your respiratory system approaches final failure. Each breath requires enormous effort and provides diminishing oxygen to tissues that are already starving for basic nutrients. Your life force ebbs with each labored inhalation. The survival instincts that guided your behavior throughout your entire existence begin failing as your brain loses the capacity to process environmental information and generate appropriate responses. Your behavioral programming breaks down as the hardware that runs it deteriorates beyond repair. Your circulation slows as your heart struggles to pump blood through a cardiovascular system damaged by malnutrition and toxin exposure. Your extremities grow cold and numb as blood flow prioritizes vital organs that are themselves failing. Your body begins shutting down in systematic fashion. The mudflat that has been your home throughout your entire life becomes your final resting place as you lose the strength to move from the small depression where you've taken shelter. Your territory shrinks to the few square inches of space your body occupies. Your world becomes as small as yourself. Your consciousness begins fading as your brain receives insufficient oxygen and nutrients to maintain normal function. Awareness becomes intermittent, flickering like a candle in the wind. Your perception of the world around you dims as your sensory systems shut down one by one. The environmental chaos that destroyed your habitat reaches its inevitable conclusion as the last traces of the ecosystem that once supported mudskipper civilization disappear forever. Your species' long relationship with this environment ends not with a bang, but with a whimper as the final individual succumbs to conditions that no amount of adaptation could overcome. Your heart beats its final rhythm as your cardiovascular system completes its shutdown sequence. Blood flow stops, oxygen delivery ceases, and cellular metabolism grinds to a halt. Your body begins the transition from living organism to organic matter that will eventually return to the earth. The story that began with a tiny egg floating in murky water reaches its conclusion on a barren mudflat where nothing can survive. Your journey from helpless larva to territorial dominant to environmental victim spans the rise and fall of an entire ecological age. Your individual existence becomes a microcosm of your species' struggle against impossible odds. Your final breath carries with it the last conscious thought of a mudskipper who lived to see the end of the world. The air that once sustained countless generations of your kind becomes the medium through which your life force finally escapes. Your story ends as it began, with a single moment that changes everything. The mudflat falls silent as your body becomes still. No other mudskippers remain to mourn your passing or learn from your example. Your death marks not just the end of an individual life, but the conclusion of an evolutionary experiment that lasted millions of years. The age of mudskippers ends with you. Your body settles into the mud for the final time, joining the countless generations of mudskippers who came before you. But your story doesn't end with your death. It becomes part of something larger. The mud that receives you holds the chemical traces of every creature that ever lived here, a molecular library of life that once thrived in this place. The burrow system you spent years perfecting becomes a fossil record of mudskipper engineering, preserved in sediment layers that will tell future scientists about a species that mastered the transition between water and land. Your architectural innovations, carved into the earth itself, outlast your biological existence by millennia. The genetic material you contributed to the next generation carries forward in ways you never could have imagined. Some of your offspring, scattered to distant territories before the collapse, survive in refugias where conditions still support life. They carry your DNA into new environments, adapting to circumstances you never faced, evolving solutions to problems you never encountered. Your mate's final clutch of eggs, abandoned when conditions became impossible, holds genetic combinations that represent millions of years of evolutionary refinement. Though they never hatch in your territory, similar genetic packages exist in populations that found sanctuary beyond the reach of environmental catastrophe. The territorial knowledge you accumulated over decades of careful observation becomes part of the collective wisdom that future mudskipper populations will rediscover. The optimal burrow designs, hunting strategies, and social structures you pioneered will be reinvented by survivors who face similar challenges in new environments. Your story becomes one thread in the vast tapestry of mudskipper existence that stretches back millions of years and forward into an uncertain but persistent future. Individual lives end, ecosystems collapse, but the fundamental drive to survive and adapt continues in populations that find ways to persist despite seemingly impossible odds. The environmental changes that destroyed your world represent just one chapter in the ongoing story of life on Earth. Species have faced extinction events before and found ways to survive them. The mudskippers that carry your genetic legacy forward will face their own challenges and develop their own solutions, guided by the evolutionary wisdom encoded in their DNA. Your individual success, measured in territory controlled and offspring produced, becomes part of the statistical foundation that determines which genetic variations survive the great filter of environmental catastrophe. Your life mattered not just to you, but to the future of your entire species. The mudflat that was your home will eventually recover, given enough time and the right conditions. New ecosystems will emerge from the ruins of the old, providing opportunities for life forms that can adapt to changed circumstances. Perhaps mudskippers will be among them, carrying forward the lessons learned from your generation's struggle. Your story, like that of every mudskipper who ever lived, demonstrates the remarkable resilience of life in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges. From your first breath of air on a tidal mudflat to your last moments in a dying ecosystem, you embodied the determination to survive that has carried your species through countless challenges over millions of years. The cycle continues, as it always has, with new individuals facing new challenges and finding new ways to overcome them. Your complete life as a mudskipper, from birth to death, represents just one iteration of an ongoing experiment in survival that spans geological time and connects you to every mudskipper that came before and everyone that will come after. Your legacy lives on in the mud, in the genes, and in the endless story of life finding a way to persist against all odds. The mudflat falls silent, but somewhere else, in some other place where conditions still allow it, a tiny mudskipper is taking its first breath of air and beginning its own journey from birth to death. The story never truly ends. It just moves to a new chapter, with new characters facing the eternal challenge of survival in an ever-changing world. Here you can find the next story. Click on it. Until then, see you soon.